Alabama on Thursday executed a prisoner with nitrogen gas in what was the first use of a new controversial method of capital punishment. Human rights groups, UN torture experts, and lawyers had sought to prevent it, saying the method was risky, experimental, and could lead to an agonizing death or non-fatal injury. Kenneth Smith was convicted of the 1988 murder for hire of Elizabeth Sennett. He was one of only a few prisoners to have survived an execution attempt. In 2022, Alabama officials aborted his execution by lethal injection after struggling for hours to insert the needle in his body. In Smith's second trip to the execution chamber on Thursday, executioners restrained him in a gurney and strapped a respirator mask to his face. A canister of pure nitrogen was attached to the mask that, once flowing, deprived him of oxygen. Alabama Corrections Commissioner John Hamm told reporters the execution had gone as expected.
It appeared that Smith was holding his breath as long as he could, and then there's also information out there. He struggled against his restraints a little bit, but there's some involuntary movement and some agonal breathing, so that was all expected and is in the side effects that we've seen or researched on nitrogen hypoxia. So nothing was out of the ordinary of what we were expecting.
Smith's spiritual advisor, Reverend Jeff Hood, who was at Smith's side for the execution, gave his own account.
What we saw was minutes of someone struggling for their life. We saw minutes of someone heaving back and forth. We saw spit. We saw all sorts of stuff from his mouth develop on the mask. We saw this mask tied to the gurney and him ripping his head forward over and over and over again. And we also saw correction officials in the room who were visibly surprised at how bad this thing went.
5 journalists who were allowed to watch the execution said that after the nitrogen began to flow, Smith shook his head and writhed on the gurney for about 2 minutes, then breathed deeply for several minutes more before his breathing eventually became imperceptible. Before the nitrogen was switched on, Smith made a lengthy final statement that began, quote, "Tonight, Alabama caused humanity to take a step backward." Leading up to the execution, Smith had mounted legal challenges in federal courts, arguing that Alabama's new method amounted to unconstitutional, cruel, and unusual punishment. The U.S. Supreme Court's conservative majority ultimately rejected Smith's final appeal to delay his death. Oklahoma and Mississippi have also approved nitrogen asphyxiation methods for executions, but have yet to deploy it.